Shri Kamala Shane Bajtara Charan Deko Shantamone Premonayani Aparupa Priya Darshana Aparupa Priya Darshana.
Namaste and welcome to the SRV ashram in Portland, Oregon. It's February 2018 and my name is Mahesh. I'm joined here by Babaji Bob Kindler, our resident spiritual director, and we're going to embark on another spiritual journey today. This will be our fourth interview between me and Babaji, and I think ninth in the series that we have. Our previous episode of this program, we were discussing dreams and how they manifest in spiritual life and the meanings of dreams. We've also done a few episodes on music as well as the different ways to bring Vedanta into your life. So along those same lines, the same unbroken thread of Vedantic thought, we're going to discuss today about a topic of naming, nama, and how that pertains to our spiritual life. So I want to start first by setting the foundation for everything that we do here at SRV. We do it with a sincerity for seeking the highest truth and earnestness of the right questioning and right mental posture that allows us to walk down the pathway to that truth, and finally a desire for the highest truth. That's the earnestness. So with that foundation laid in place, welcome Babaji, Namaste.
Namaste.
And I had mentioned today that we're going to be speaking about name and what that means in our tradition. I did a little bit of research on the background of the whole concept of name. I know in the most recent YouTube series we have up with regards to the Shakti Advaitavada, you had a wonderful chart of the Devi with all of the different aspects of the Devi, and on the base you had defined out the 5 parts of Maya, and those were Nama, Rupa, Kala, Desha, and Nimitta. And we know those as name, form, time, space, and causality. And so based on that, I thought, let's discuss the first one of those, nama. One of the things that I was reading about is nam or name or nom. There's so many different etymological, in all the different languages of the world, there's this concept of name. And in some of the Near East religions, they've had a lot of reverence for names and taking the names of God, and enough so that the Jewish tradition doesn't even want you to say it at all, Yahweh, or there's something that they say Hashem instead of saying the name of Jehovah. They say Hashem as a pointer. It just means the name, and they recognize it's extremely powerful. Name is an extremely powerful construct, and it shouldn't be used in a fashion that's not befitting to the Lord. And we know that in the Muslim tradition there's the 99 names of Allah. In the Zoroastrian tradition there's 101 names of Ahura Mazda. In our tradition there's 108 names for, you name any particular deity, we can recite 108 names for that deity. So this is one of the motivations for embarking upon this discussion. So we're gonna start off that way. So I want to first go back to the base of the Devi chart and have you kind of explain to us how you came about placing those words of Maya down there at the base.
The platform that she's sitting in lotus position upon is the 5 aspects of Maya. We get that from Swami Vivekananda because before he came, which was in 1893, people were beginning to hear about Sanskrit terms and gained interest in tantric ways and Vedic ways, yoga and so forth. It was beginning to come on the scene in America, and people were beginning to name Maya as illusion. And Swami Vivekananda was quick to expand that, not leave it just in that limited context, because even to this day, when Vedanta comes forth with its great axioms, like Brahman Satya Jagat Mithya, Brahman is real, the world is unreal, and people hear this term unreal, then they get either depressed or elated, as the case may be, or any stance in between those two, may be confused, is one of them. And so calling something outright illusory or unreal isn't doing it any justice, and to flesh out the concept so people will know that really what they mean by unreal is ever changing. In the West and even in America, we should probably be able to look back to Jesus' teachings and see that he had to separate the wheat from the chaff. That's a kind of viveka, discrimination between the real and the unreal, or the unchanging and the changing, and that you wouldn't build your house on the ladder. So that's sort of a good description for people not becoming too comfortable in the house of Maya, which Swamiji expanded to say consists of name, form, time, space, and causality. Nama, rupa, desha, kala, nimitta. So if we're focusing on nama here, you've brought up probably the most important aspect of it to keep in mind would be the names of the Lord, or the Lord's name. And mantra, for instance, would be maybe the next thing you would think about in our tradition, because mantra has a lot of power in it. It's got seed bijams, that you put next to the name to empower the name. And this is all kind of an inner psychology that's yogic based. Yoga psychology is based more from the mind, although people in the West are trying to render it into, or maybe mistakenly rendering it into, a physical aspect only, which would be how a materialistic culture would look at it naturally. But you have to realize that that from time out of mind, the ancient rishis of India were bringing back this truth, and they bring it back cycle to cycle, of the unreality of, the ultimate unreality of anything that has a name. In other words, the Lord, if you want to use an affectionate term for him, her, or it, with form or beyond form, is formless in essence. I think Sri Krishna brings that out nicely in the Gita when he says, there's my manifested form, and he calls that eightfold, the 5 elements of nature plus the mind, threefold mind. And then he says, but then there's my unmanifested form. So you think maybe that would be the end of it. But unmanifested is everything within you, following along that Purnamadaha, Purnamidam, Purnat Purnamudachyate peace chant, that everything within is infinite, everything outside, obviously, we found is also infinite, even name and form and time and space. So the only conclusion then to draw is from the infinite, all of this apparently finite has come, and since it's come from the infinite, though, it remains infinite. So whether you're looking inside, involution style, or outside to the manifested universe of name and form, then you find an infinite amount of names. I'm sure that you wouldn't restrict it to 108 names in our tradition, because there's the Sahasranam too. There's many deities have 1,000 name hymns that you can go on singing for hours. And the priests do sing these for hours at pujas and celebrations and holy days. But back to where I was focusing on is that this definition that Swami Vivekananda gave to Maya saved us from becoming Mayavadan only. Then our path became, oh, this is Maya, I have to renounce it completely. So it doesn't really leave 90 or 95% of humanity with any station to go to. They say that's why Buddhism almost didn't develop into a religion, because the accent was so much on formlessness. So to achieve a balance there, you would really want to say God is essentially formless, but also can assume forms.
Mm-hmm.
Problem is, people are identifying with forms. So it's a nice English way of putting it. You're into the realm of name, right? When you use words. So let's use the name assume instead of identify with. And even beyond that, you can identify with something if you can disidentify with it. That's even a more facile soul who can take a body and give it up without, say, fear of death, like Patanjali speaks about in yoga. Or clinging to life, you would put it. It's the abhinivesha,
Mm-hmm.
the Sanskrit. So the names of the Lord, make sure to leave the nameless, formless part.
Nameless.
Nameless is probably the idea. But if you do bring it into the realm of name, then make sure that you have the right reverence. Like you said, starting off today, you have that right mental atmosphere or posture, what Lord Buddha called right orientation in the Eightfold Path for that, and keep that sacrosanct. Then as you use words, they also become manifestations of a mindset that's considered named to be divine or sacred.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where, say, worldly talk, which Ramakrishna say, my ears are burning with the talk of worldly people, which worldly people really means pleasure seekers and heaven seekers. And anything that increases your wealth and so forth, which is, we know in India is as much of a path as going to the formless reality, because and all these things have names and forms, objects. So you're looking at a whole spectrum of from formless to God with form, to form beginning to depart the part itself from intelligence. So when it comes to a place where people are just using it every day and that's all they're using, then they've drifted away from the meaning of the words. And I think that's also happens in our education in the West. We feel like we're learning something new, and we have names for it and languages,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, to put it in. But we don't know that those words as sounds and are based in these seed concepts that are back inside the mind, the great mind, if you want to put it that way. And that as vibrations, too, they cause sensations, also back in the mind early. The sensation to project worlds on the level of the Trinity, say, or the sensation of words like heaven and pleasure and so forth that caused the ancestors to create whole realms or lokas of form, subtle form, back inside of us, so that we were talking for you and I this morning at breakfast about the ancestor realm and how one can get caught in that, and how the seers don't get caught in that. Even when they take families, they don't get caught in that. So intelligence, how we study, how we go about knowledge, is we think we're learning something new, number one, but there's nothing new under the sun to the knowers of truth. And then number two, we think that if we hear the word and we understand it with our intellect, that that's the extent of it. But that's not true. There's pondering. I was on my way up to Seattle to teach a retreat last weekend. I was driving your car, as I say, and then up the river we went and towards Seattle, and all of a sudden there's this exit called Ponder, you see. So I was saying, I think I almost took that exit, you see, because I wanted to go ponder what I was thinking about. So if you ponder, and you're going to have to use name, and ponder it, whether it's the name of the Lord or the name of Dharma, many names of Dharma, or even the names of your children, and when you name them, the whole spectrum has to be done with reverence and with intelligence and tact, and not just secular intelligence. Well, I can stop there for more questions, but that's sort of like what I heard.
You had mentioned seeds, and so I'm kind of remembering as Maya is the cause of differentiation, and Maya does this through giving name and form to objects. That's the cause of the differentiation. If there was no name, then there would be one homogeneous presence, right? And that's the reality. And I think that that is that little piece of ignorance that needs to be kind of, the veil has to be taken away so that we recognize there really is no name, no form, and we are all that, right? And I think the seed mantra starts to bring us back to that level.
Yes,
right?
Very well put. I'm growing up here, we're in Portland, Oregon right now. Growing up here as a boy, I remember not being aware of Maya, and neither was anyone else around me. But at 19, when I discovered Sanskrit and I discovered Divine Mother Path and the Vedic teachings and Upanishads of the Rishis, all of a sudden I had a name for what was bothering me about this whole thing, about being raised without the Dharma, about school, focusing only on money-making careers, and the whole thing bothered me from the very get-go. And I didn't have a name for it. When I had that one four-letter word, the queen of all four-letter words, Maya, came forth, then all of a sudden I felt much better because I realized, just as you were saying, just to recognize it, even if it's still present.
Acknowledge it.
Acknowledge it, yeah, and then you can draw back from it, and it changes your life and your thinking around it. You can even participate in it, but still have that ability to disidentify.
You know how to play the game, but you can always go to the sideline.
That's good, yeah.
You had mentioned the power of words and how matrikas are put together. I know you've given us a teaching about Saraswati, the Vakdevi, imparting power into words and imparting meaning into words. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite of all concepts and teachings. And that's probably shared equally by Vedicists and Tantricists in India. They both had a very deep love affair with the word. And it's hard to even find the origin for it. Of course, we know it's the final origin. In the beginning was the Word. Word was with God. The Word was God, was how that got explained to John, but by an illumined soul. And so my favorite teaching about that, and one of the more recent books that we put out with SRV was Jnana Matra, just two Sanskrit words, the wisdom particle. So people are talking about this particle and that particle and atomic particles and subatomic particles, and it's to begin to trace it to an origin, although we know everything is non-originated, is to begin to ferret out the presence of Shakti in everything, rather than Maya. So you make just a subtle shift. Te dhyan yogam nugato pasham devatma shaktim svagunayar nagudam, they say in the Saitashvatara Upanishad. The ancient rishis practiced the art of meditation, and when they did, they found all of a sudden the presence of the devatma shaktim, the divine energy, could put it that way, in everything, which had been veiled to them earlier because of the limitation of their own intellects. All of a sudden, through meditation, and they begin to see or feel, intuit, and then actually envision that and know that everything was infused with living intelligence. If you just go around with that thought, like you ponder it, take that exit and ponder it for a while, all of a sudden your life is entirely different than the way everyone else is thinking, except these enlightened souls. You join their company, whether they're past or not, you join their company. And you probably will go looking for a teacher to help you explain that deeper. But I would say that if you look deeper and deeper into the particle of the object, you find subatomic, changing at a billionth of a second. And if you look deeper and deeper into the particle of the thought, the word first, and then connect it to the thought, then you're beginning to go beyond the finite into the infinite. And you will eventually realize the Devatma Shakti existing in everything and everywhere, they said. And your intellect will expand. May our bodies have health, may our life force flow, and may our mind expand in its capacity to know that.
I have some quotes from Holy Mother that I'd like to share that just kind of coalesce very well into what you just said here.
All right, if you want me to stop talking forever, go ahead and speak about my ideals, words. I hope I won't start
Holy Mother says,
weeping.
chanting God's holy name lessens the intensity of karmic effects. So she gives us this instruction to repeat it 20,000 times a day, give or take a few thousand.
Yeah.
And how small is the bija of the Lord's name? Yet from that springs forth in due time spiritual consciousness, devotion, and love.
Yeah.
So it's a way and a pathway to take the many forms and names, coalesce them into one, and try to realize the goal. That's how I see it.
Yes, right. And she would know because she's called the manifestation of Divine Mother in this age. I was saying about her the other day that, well, people came and she seemed like a simple village woman, but can you name yet one other woman in history who has become the leader of an organization full of 5 million people, many of them monks? Good luck with that.
Yeah.
And that's current today. So she's not just a simple village woman. She put on a form, and then that's how the ancient rishis had to meditate in order to come to expand their intellect, so they could recognize the Devatma Shakti and everything. So she's a living representation of that. So if we hear her simple words, teachings like that, then that causes even the high-minded to have samadhi, just by the words, just by pondering them. So words are that powerful.
Absolutely.
And more.
Along those same lines, Yoganma, I was looking in the Gospel of Holy Mother, and Yoganma says that the name of the Lord is identical with Brahman. And so she's equating the form with the formless, as kind of grabbing onto that thread and following it back to the source where it dissolves.
Yes.
Right. So even if the mind is not concentrated at the outset, you will succeed ultimately. And it's this concept of it's a seed that can survive a forest fire, right? It remains there, and it's always there for you to, cut through the chains of Maya, so you can get back. I think that's one of the few things we have in this world that help us get out of the world.
Or transform it into what it really is, Brahman.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you hear that Brahman is real, the world is unreal, or Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka is another great wordy saying, that meditate on the difference between the eternal and the non-eternal. That's essentially what you're doing. You're transforming what seems to be Maya into Devatma Shakti. Then the word shouldn't be hard to understand, and then you can equate it with Brahman. In the beginning was the Word, and it was with God, but then it was God. So you have three different things there, is how Vedanta would unwrap some of Jesus' sayings.
It's kind of gross, subtle, causal.
Yeah, exactly. And then Shvara, the one-eyed smile.
So you can use, Holy Mother talks about japa, and you can use the name of the Lord to get you from gross, subtle, causal, right? And it seems like it's a vehicle in some way to help you go on that path. There's another story where Holy Mother's in an ecstatic state, and I think Swami Yogananda whispered the name of the Lord in her ear and helped her come down, right, into the gross world. So from that, I recognize that same power that can take you from gross to causal can also bring you from causal back to gross.
Yes.
So that's kind of a conundrum, but it seems to have, it's a double-edged pathway, double-edged sword.
Like Mother Kali's sword, exactly. To bring an enlightened soul down to a state of mind where we can understand him or her would be one of the benefits of knowing the mantras. Because she used to say herself, Sri Ramakrishna, when he was alive, taught me all the mantras and the deities they connect to. Well, we think about deities in Hinduism or even Greek or Rome, the pantheon of gods, wherever they might appear, as being something up above us, or we don't know where they are. Maybe we don't ponder it very well. But actually, they have names and they have forms, and both of those are subtle. And so it's just like if someone were looking away from you and you call their name, they look at you. So if you call the name of these gods and goddesses who maybe not be looking at you right now, they'll all of a sudden turn their attention on you. You have to, of course, do it in the right way, with the right identification, the right knowledge, right attitude, as we're saying. Then their look is not all of a sudden a vision necessarily, but it's actually an energy that reveals the whole secret of it, is that they're all within you. When you realize the feet of Brahman, you'll realize that all gods and goddesses are within you. One song, speaking about songs, Shukirvi, that song we sing in Bengali, that's one of the lines to it. You'll remember this very auspicious day, they say. Yeah.
I know the master would say, the name is not some trifle thing. You need to really put your mind in the right focus in order to get the benefit out of chanting it. You can't do it with a mind that's focused on desires of the world, because you'll never then turn towards the inner world.
Yes, and it brings up a very good point that we in Vedanta, we're so attached to knowledge first. Krishna says it's the greatest purifier. So we use that first, and then when the mind is in a fine and fettled condition, it begins to love. And that's where Sri Ramakrishna said, don't use the word love in a glib way. That's a very profound word you're talking about there. And then it's only, you can really only feel it when the mind has become purified by knowledge. So if you're not feeling the love of God, if you want to expand your devotion, then you probably should take the mind and ego to task and see what needs to be removed so that you can have a straight and true pathway to the divine reality through your own mind. She used to say that too, Holy Mother, is that, the mind, it may not be ultimate reality, but it's very important at this state of the game. The state of the game means embodiment. When you're here in relativity, you're here in Maya, so how are you going to transform this into Brahman? Because they're saying Brahman is here in everything too, so what's the missing element or secret to that? And of course that's why mantra is there, and as you're saying, it's not only just the names of the Lord, but the act of saying them is there in Islam and Hinduism and Christianity, Catholicism.
Rosary,
Sufism.
chanting.
Yeah, it's very important practice. It's probably the most universal practice of all. So that's all worthy of pondering.
Yeah, since we were on the topic of music, I have one selection in mind from your collection. I was thinking of Nama Japana Q Chordiya.
Ram, that's the name of Ram there, yeah.
And the translation there, that you put it so succinctly, was, "O mind, why have you given up uttering the holy name of Ram? You have sacrificed your love of truth for what? Trifle in this world. You flatter the millionaire, yet you forget to praise Sri Ram, who owns this entire universe." And the song goes on this way to help you recognize that you should be chanting the name of Ram.
Yeah, why have you given it up?
Why have you given up?
And people think, again, Brahman's real, the world's unreal, that they're going to have to give up the world to go to Brahman. It's only in here that the world appears. Like Shankar uses, you're going away from a city, but there's a mirror. You look in the mirror and you see the city reflected back there that you're leaving. So it's a reflection in a mirror, all name and form. And the formless reality is you, and the mirror needs to be kept clean because that's your mind. So you can see that there's a difference between the reality that you're trying to realize and that which is standing in the way as a facade or as a reflection. I mean, they use many words for Maya: reflection, if you're kind to it, expression. If you're really wanting to clear the field, you false superimposition, vivarta, adhyasa, or an outright illusion. And that's, of course, where you'll have to read Swami Vivekananda. He has his Jnana Yoga book. He has a lecture in there called Maya, a Statement of Fact. So he's not calling it an illusion. It's a statement of fact. And that comes from the Indian pathways, the rishis, that drishti shrishti vada, that it's real as long as you see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, smell it. It seems real to you. So to call it an illusion might be giving it a disservice, probably also might be confusing you, because at the same time the non-dualists are coming forth and saying, thou art that, and they're coming forth and saying, Brahman is here, and they're saying even objects are reflections of Brahman. So you're beginning to have these conflicting teachings. It would have been better for you to have taken a teacher, read the scriptures, and then put that all in the right perspective, and therefore define Maya in the right way. And samsara is another word that you would use in a later date, Buddha's time, samsara.
We were talking about the form of the Lord as well as the name, and I know there's some nice stories in Tantra about how the name is probably sometimes greater than the form, and I want to share some of those. In the Ramayana, Sri Ram had to construct a bridge to cross over the ocean. This is the Lord himself. Hanuman, all he had to do is say the name of the Lord, and he was able to jump all the way over to Lanka. And the other part of that story is when...
Clever monkey.
Yeah, clever monkey. When he was building that bridge with the squirrels and the monkeys and the apes and so on, those stones were falling into the ocean, and they weren't able to build that bridge. But Ram said, well, why don't you just write my name on the side of each one of those stones? And so they carved the name of Ram, and all of a sudden those same stones began to float with the power imbued by Sri Ram himself. Another one that I found was, there's a story where Sri Krishna, they put him on a balance scale, and on one side it was him, his entire body, and on the other side was a tulsi leaf inscribed with the name of Sri Krishna. And it happened to be that Krishna was lighter than the tulsi leaf. And his teaching there, again, is that my name is better than my form. And go forth and remember this. So those are two kind of intertwined concepts of name and form, and the teachings kind of tell us that hold on to that name. It's the first thing that has come out from Maya, and it's the one that can take you back in.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good teaching. Especially if people, even in religion, become too attached to the form. Personality worship, those kinds of things. The principle is, probably the name is better to outline the principle, whereas the form has that risk, you might say, of falling into separation and individuation and so forth.
Personality.
Yeah. Yeah, very good. What else do you have for us? You've done your homework. I feel out like I didn't do my homework.
We were talking a little bit about that in the Kali Yuga, Sri Ramakrishna says we have to keep the sanctity of the Lord's name, and always keep that special. But Holy Mother kind of comes in and saves all of us when she says that whether you jump into water yourself or if you're pushed into the water, it doesn't matter. You get wet either way. And the point is, if you repeat the name of the Lord, whether or not your mind is concentrated or not, you're going to get benefit out of it. So she kind of flips the coin, and even though we know we're supposed to keep the name sacrosanct, even if we're in a bad mood, even if we had a bad day at work, if we sit down and do meditation, try to do meditation, right? Our mind may be elsewhere. There's some benefit of sitting there on that cushion every day and trying to chant the name of the
Calling
Lord.
up the name, yeah, for sure. Higher the name, the more it's the power of dissolution for Maya. Maya, you'll arise to Mahamaya. They say Mahamaya is of course, a much deeper realm of consciousness, where the seers and rishis will abide more. Even their dreams become meditations, and their deep sleep becomes conscious realization of seeds, and their bodies, their forms can do the same with that kind of knowledge. Can shift from gross to subtle to causal and beyond, and take on form again, gross form again, all without falling under the illusion of difference or change. So that would be afforded to most beings by the power of the name.
In the song Om Ring Tung, which we spoke about a couple interviews ago, the translation there is, O Lord Ramakrishna, your name is purity itself.
Swiftly it
awakens us from the sleep
of
delusion.
Yeah.
And so the power is there. Can you explain how it's there in a particular name? And I was asking you at breakfast about how Ramakrishna got his name, and I guess we don't really know, but it's somehow imbued with this power as well.
Yes. Well, how Ramakrishna got his name, I've never heard anyone say, or got the teaching related to me of how it turned from Gadadhar, which is a name for Vishnu, to Ramakrishna, and how this great Ramakrishna became an absolute dedicated devotee of Mother Kali, and how when he was a baby he crawled into the hearth and got ash all over him, this naked baby. Mother looked away, and so that's Shiva. So we have this Deva Devi Swarupaya, which is a part of that song too. Om Shtapakaya Cha Dharmasha. He's steady in all the dharmas, and he's the manifestation of all the deities. Sarva Deva Devi Swarupaya, the essence of them. That's, of course, indication of an avatar, so they'll call him the Matri avatar, because he brought Divine Mother back. And of course, she's the purveyor and the possessor of all names. She it is in the Sri Devi Bhagavatam that gives the seeds to Lord Brahma, seeds of name, and so that he can create the worlds of form, name and form, and time and space can then kick in. So that's an important teaching that focuses or emphasizes the import of the name.
I've heard that they say that when a beginning aspirant starts to do japa, he or she may not enjoy that benefit or enjoy the bliss of God's name. But that's not the fault of the God's name. The fault is really in the mind of the devotee.
Sure.
The mind that's focused on worldly possessions and desires of lust and greed and so forth. And once that's turned around, slowly but surely that flower will then blossom. It's up to that beginning aspirant to stick to that path, though, and get to that point where they can
I think
achieve
that
that
would
bliss.
be a good way of describing the difference between a mantra, which is a purificatory mechanism, and a Mahavakya. Mahavakya you just say once, or should be able to just say it once, and your mind is already so pure, maybe from mantra practice in previous lifetimes, that when the Mahavakya is given to you, just puts the soul into samadhi, because there is no Maya in the way anymore. The mantra has been able to settle your mind in such a way and make it one-pointed to introduce it to a great word like that, or a great saying, Mahavakya, Vak Devi.
Yeah.
She's again as much or more in the great sayings as she is in the mantras. And it could even be that, and that's what I didn't answer about your last question, was that there are different gods and goddesses that fall at different levels in the pantheon. And so Holy Mother used to say that, and Sri Krishna has mentioned it in the Gita too, is that some mantras do not convey that much power. They only get you to the deity itself. But then there's the mother of all deities, who is the meaning of the word in their mantra, but also is the meaning in the words in Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva's mantras and the avatars that you're meditating on. When you get a mantra, you usually get the name of an avatar. Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Christ even.
So these bijas are kind of like passwords that let you
into
walk past
deeper
the
levels
door.
of your own consciousness. Yes, we've described it that way before. So that even there you have those teachings in the Gita where the worshipper of the Pitris go to the Pitris, ancestors, because their mantras are filled with flowery words of the Vedas or the Bible or other scriptures, and they're disputing about this and they're trying to get pleasure, which is heaven. And so right away that's a Pitri dish. It's a double entendre, but it's the culture of your ancestors that's being bred by those lower mantras. But then he said, then the worshippers of the devas and devis go to the devas and devis. That's the gods, which is a deeper level. So you might have a mantra for them. But if you get a mantra from an avatar, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, the Trinity, then you're putting that together with the name of the Lord, which is already undefiled by the tongue of ancestors, humans, and so forth. Then it conveys a great power. And that can penetrate through all the knots in consciousness. They're called granthis. Like even in the seven chakra system, there's 3 great knots that keep you being reborn in the 3 lower worlds, or penetrating through that knot and getting to the heart, and then penetrating through the third eye and getting into the Sahasrara, 1,000-petaled lotus. So Mother Mantra, they say, can penetrate through all of those. It's the most powerful. She's the Vak Devi, she's the power in all the words. So
if there's the 1 or 2 of these Maha Mantras that are like skeleton keys, then how do the other lower mantras fit in to the diaspora of Sankirtan and Japanam?
They fit in according to the capacity of the aspirant. Basically, they call that adhikara vichara. It has to do with the capacity of the aspirant, like you were just saying.
To wield the mantra.
Yeah, and you were just saying that they can get much more out of their mantra practice if they're focused. You mentioned Holy Mother saying that, whether you jump in or get your foot in a little bit at a time into the water, but there's those people that have to be pushed in from behind, like any jokester will do at any swimming pool when I was growing up. So you're caught off guard and you're actually pushed into your own essence some way. So that's how you could be surprised by teachings, because I think slokas are mantras too. And we have to probably make that connection from the Bhakti Yoga path into the Jnana Yoga path, and know that the slokas, again, if you ponder them and contemplate them, they're just like mantras. You can have a favorite sloka awaken you to deeper levels of your own consciousness.
I remember we were at the river retreat a few years ago, and we were watching the Sanskrit movie on Adi Shankaracharya. And in the beginning, this is the life and times of Adi Shankaracharya, where a student goes up to the master and says, I don't understand reality. And then the teacher says, Tattvamasi. And then right like that, the student's, oh, of course. And goes into divine bliss. And if it were so simple in this day and age, right? But it's about qualification, as you're pointing to that chart.
Yeah, and then put that together with transmission, because our founder Lex Sixon used to talk a lot about transmission. Once we got initiated, he would come up to us and say, do you realize what just happened to you? He'd like take you by the shoulders and almost shake you. You just got initiated by the last living devotee of Sri Sharda Devi. And you have to really now dive deep with that mantra and say it over and over again. And her name with the bijam she gave. It's a very powerful thing. So he'd make you immediately be aware of the transmission that you got. Because this teacher that you got it from, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, his picture's there on our shrine, may peace and bliss be upon him always, gave you that mantra after reciting it for 70, 80 years in his life. And she got it from Sri Ramakrishna. He gave her all the mantras and what they mean and how to connect them to the deities. So you're getting this transmission from a very deep source. And all the way back to the word.
The image that came to my mind is the passing of a baton that someone has held on to for 70 years, and now they're offering it to you.
Yes.
And do you have the capacity to hold on to it now?
Yeah.
Right.
And maybe you can get out of the race by passing.
Yeah.
Eventually win and get out of the race.
So that mantra is very special. It's more than just the letters put together. It has a consciousness to it.
Yes.
A power behind it. Can you talk about
you'll
that?
probably only find that by taking the letters apart. Because the mantras, the secret's in the particles. The teaching of mantra in our tradition is that there's a triple goddess called Tripura Sundari, and you get the first part of her, of that Tripura Sundari, in the actual transmission of the guru to the disciple, when he whispers that in your ear, gives you that in sacred ceremony. But now it's up to you to find two other subtler parts of her. You might even call that from the gross manifestation of the mantra to the subtle world, to the causal world. You're actually, whether you put it in terms of words or worlds or names or forms, it all translates to this, you might say, even this three-step inward process, from dualism to qualified non-dualism to non-dualism, from saying it aloud to muttering it to doing it silent in your mind. All these triple designations fall in accord with each other and help you to understand the profound meaning in it. And eventually the Tripura Sundari will unfold herself completely to you inside of your mantra practice, and of course that will equate to bliss. A beautiful song in India that says, even great yogis who meditate for decades in caves don't always get her vision. Her vision is very rare. It's very important then, since it is so rare, to make sure you have all the tools in place on that journey. You call it inward journey, this interview. So make sure you have all the tools, that you had a teacher, you read the scriptures, he gave you the mantra in sacred ceremony, you took it seriously with a purified mind, with qualification, and then you said it. And I think that's probably why people give up the mantra after a couple of weeks or a few months or 5 years and say, oh, it didn't work or something, because all of those things weren't in place yet.
Yeah.
And perseverance, if they're not in place, it's not casting an aspersion on you and your practice. It means that you'll just bring them together and you'll see how simple and beautiful this is, how natural the word is. And your life, if Sri Ramakrishna showed us anything, it showed us that samadhi is our own true nature, and that it shouldn't be considered something that we haven't seen since Shankara or Chaitanya. It's our own very nature.
So you had mentioned initiation and taking the mantra from the guru and getting the instructions and so forth. And one of the great things that happens as part of the initiation you do is you impart a spiritual name to us as well. And I want to talk about that a little bit, and how in the Ramakrishna order, do you know, or can you explain how brahmacharyas either choose a name or get one chosen for them, and the same thing with swamis? And then, what is your process for imparting a spiritual name for us?
In the Ramakrishna order, and I've heard this and also heard it from the young monks and from swamis to a certain extent, is that usually the name is chosen for you, and usually after they come to know your temperament a little bit as a young man or as a young woman in the Shardamat. You would have some. It's sort of like the guru and shishya disciples relationship. but on the monastic level would mean that the Swami, in that case a Swami, and then the Brahmacharya seeking that kind of entrance into spiritual life, into sannyas eventually, will have to spend 5 years, maybe I think in the Ramakrishna order, as a celibate young student. And then in that period, it's pretty obvious to the one who's guiding him, or several might be guiding him at that place, at that time, and that, what the person's characteristics is, what his karmas are, what his advantages are, what his disadvantages are, and all of that could play into the name. So when you get a name, it's going to be, in my experience, something that's a lot better than who you think you are. Wow, I must be great, you're thinking, Of course, careful the ego,
Yeah.
It means something that you need to aspire to.
Right. It's aspirational.
Aspiration's important. So you could be called Lord of the Universe. Isn't that your name? Well, do you feel like you're the Lord of the Universe? Probably not, half the time. But it's something to aspire to. And so that's an advantage of having a spiritual name. I mean, there are swamis and teachers who just don't do it. You don't need a name, just go on with your own Western name. So it's not essential, but I think it's an aid to most people in the West to have one, and especially if they don't take it in the wrong way. It's something to aspire to. It's also, though, at the same time, your essence.
Mm-hmm.
So in between what you aspire to and the essence, there's all these problems. Knots, blocks. And what's good for those? The word, the mantra. That's why they will give you the name at the same time they give you the mantra.
Mm-hmm. I think that's, I like the explanation that it's an aspirational goal for you,
Yes.
and somewhat of a stepping stone. If
Yes.
you can't be the Lord whose name you chant, at least you can get somewhere halfway in between
Right.
as a step before you can achieve more than that.
Until all the way up to that thou art,
Hmm.
like Tatvamasi, or one of these great sayings. There are 4 of them, but I'd say great sayings, there are plenty of them in the Upanishads. Like Tavaivaham, or maybe Kam Brahm. There are a whole bunch of great sayings that explain this dissolution of the line of demarcation between the apparently individualized soul and the Supreme Soul. And that was caused by a word, division, separation, difference, Maya, however. So it has to be removed by a word. And she's the one that will give you the word to your guru that will help you remove that barrier if you practice it. It comes, like you said, it comes both ways,
Mm-hmm. from
inside out and from outside in.
Let's talk a little bit more about specific names. Sri Ramakrishna himself actually said that one should cultivate an attitude, a taste for God's name. And in that discussion, he kind of said, it doesn't matter if it's Shiva or Durga or Krishna. Pick one of those. And so is there a differentiator between the different names of the Lord, and in particular the name of Ramakrishna as the mantra is imparted to us with a bijam in front of it? How are those in particular and specifically different?
I would say that personally or individually on the level of the individual soul, that's going to bring in what I was saying, capacity, ability, the thickness or lack thereof of your karmas, your samskaras. All of this will play into that picture. And like you know yourself well, that there's so many 5 quintuplications, but one of those is like the 5 sects in India. People are born as worshippers of Shiva, that is families that worship Shiva, worship Vishnu, worship Shakti, worship Ganesha. So they, which one of those is best is not the question to ask. It's if you pick one of them, the universal attitude is the other 4 get behind you. This is like kind of a new mantra, new mudra I like to do, you see. What does that mean? That I picked one goal and the other 4 got behind that goal. And that's the best way to look at it, so that you avoid any kind of confrontation with your religious brothers and sisters. And now let's talk about Sri Ramakrishna, because he's the one who's helping us do that in this age. Since he was a baby in the hearth with ashes all over him, to the time when he was named Gadadhar in a family that worshipped Vishnu as their deity, to the singing of names of Ram, to the teachings he gave out about Chaitanya and Krishna, all the way up infused with his own ideal of Mother Kali, which is Shakti, then he's this one that's most qualified in this day and age to give you a mantra that is effective for this day and age, because he's in the Kali Yuga, and you can say that name, form, time, space, and causation, we just said, were the 5 aspects of Maya, which is a statement of fact on the relative level, but which can be transformed into Mahamaya and finally into non-dualism, 3 steps inward. So if you're talking about that, then you better go to name, form, and include time, because in this day and time, this Kali Yuga, there's got to be a soul that's current on the scene, who's epitomizing at least one of those aspects to 5 million people now, since he was on Earth in 1836. He was born, 5 million followers. That's a quick amount of time, very quick to bring something as hidden as the Mother Path into prominence again, and gaining ground all the time. So it's obvious that what's happening here, and it doesn't exclude any other of the pathways, because Mother relates to all of them. She appeared secretly as Sita and Radha, and then as Fatima in Islam, and Mother Mary in Christianity, and other great appearances of hers. Then in this day and age now we have Sharda, who is my teacher's teacher, and she took a form, and she knew all the mantras given by Ramakrishna to her, and how to connect it to all those deities which make up the pantheon of levels of your own consciousness. Mm-hmm. So according to your qualification, your need, the desperate nature of your situation in Maya, or
yearning,
or your complacency, or working it even deeper to a soul who's on the cusp of getting enlightenment with a Mahavakya, she's there in all of it. She always has been, but she's been hidden. So that's why we like to chant from the Upanishads, Te Jnana Yoga Nugato Pasyan. Devatma Shaktim. They realized her. She had been hidden before because of the limitation of their own intellects. So a limited intellect would say, well, I worship Ganesha or worship Krishna or so forth, and that's all I need. But the Shakti is important. The Shakti and power in there. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, I can't even lift my finger without her. He'd look at her, who is his wife, his completely pure wife and consort, and say, without her I can't even lift my finger. So he knew that, he was this transcendental samadhi person, basically, who got there through knowledge and love, but that she was the one that provided. She epitomized the knowledge, and she was the beloved at the same time for him. So all of these things come to my mind when I think of that question that you posed.
Great.
On both the personal and the collective and the cosmic level. I could say those 3. Because beyond it, there's not, even beyond the Mahavakya, there's just this formless reality. We'll have to save that for another interview. So we have form with a small f, formlessness with a small f. That's manifested in a manifested nature. And then we have this formlessness with a capital F. And according to Holy Mother, in this day and age, someone asked her once, boy, he worshipped all the deities. He knew them all. He epitomized many of them. He had visions of some, even other religions. So what does that make us? You're Advaitis, because he was an Advaitis. You realized a string running through the pearl, or he realized a string running through all the pearls of the different religions, and he brought that out as one of the facets of Mother Kali's secret. She's clothed in space. She's completely formless, but somehow she appears in a form, and when she does, she destroys all the negativities.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
So we've been able to take name coming down from a general point down to the specificity of Ramakrishna and use that to go all the way back to formless reality now. And I think that's a good way to end. So I'm going to share, actually, instead of a chant, I found Sri Chaitanya had left a small set of instructions for how to do Sankirtan, and I found that this is called a Shikshastika, and one of the only writings of Sri Chaitanya
I was
that
just
has
looking at that like 2 weeks
remaining.
ago. Yeah.
And what I found was a translation. So this is a Ramakrishna translation. So thank you, Babaji. So Sri Chaitanya composed just a few of these verses, singing the glory of the name as a spiritual practice and a doctrine. Chant the name of the Lord and His glory unceasingly, that the mirror of the heart may be wiped clean, and quench that mighty forest fire, worldly lust, raging furiously within. O name, stream down in moonlight on the lotus heart, opening its cup to knowledge of thyself. O self, drown deep in the waves of His bliss, chanting His name continually, tasting His nectar at every step, bathing His name, that bath for weary souls. Om, peace, peace, peace.
Chida